Good morning. Welcome back to the Space Between podcast. I have a very special guest in the studio today. He is a visionary leader, entrepreneur, author, film producer, master life coach, and global speaker. He trains and empowers high-level leaders, entrepreneurs, technical subject matter experts, professionals, and speakers to prepare them for business growth, impactful presentations, and high-potential opportunities. Featured in CIO Times Magazine as a top 5 CEO to watch in 2024. He is the principal and founder of One Vision Productions, an award-winning media and branding agency whose clients range from small businesses and government agencies to Fortune 100 corporations. Mr. Forrest Tuff, thank you so much for taking time to land in the space between. I really appreciate you being here today, brother.
Hey, good to be here, Sean.
So you and I met at the Toastmasters Asheville conference, and I've never heard of you before. I've never met you. This is my first experience at Toastmasters because I believe that, getting in front of people and speaking is definitely a path I want to pursue.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I love your presentation. I loved everything about it. The power of you, mentally tough. Tell me about how that came about and why that's so important to you and for anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur.
I guess the mentally tough part came, my last name is Tuff, Tuff. So that was kind of that nice little play on words, right? But, honestly, growing up, I chose to play sports. And when I started, it's not that I didn't have the talent, but I had to bring it out. So I had to go through a lot of training and a lot of, hard lessons to actually become what I consider a great player. It wasn't a natural thing for me. So in doing that, oftentimes you have to learn to deal with failures. And I dealt with a lot of failures. I dealt with not being the best, not doing certain things, but I had a will and I had a work ethic to get there. That concept came from a young age of playing sports. Now I went on to, play Division I sports, and I was actually put in the Basketball Hall of Fame in my college. Unfortunately, I didn't make it pro, but that is where the origin of that concept came. And it was only after dealing with the lack of success in sports, realizing that dream is not going to happen, and dealing with those lows that I had to now find a way to channel those things that I did to become good in sports and actually succeed as just a human in everyday life.
So I know a little bit about your story, and I know why you wanted to play sports, and it was an identity issue for you. You talked about in the keynote, you talked about your mom wanted a little girl. So like they kind of pampered you and babied you, and you had like this identity crisis. Like, I'm going to show you I'm going to be the manliest man I can be. And that's why you kind of started going down through the sports avenue. But when you got injured, that's when something happened within you. Like you really were like, why am I here? Because you had all this identity wrapped up in something you did, not who you are. How did that shift your perspective and set you on the path to where you are now?
Well, really being the second of 5 kids, and I had an older brother. So really the whole thing about being a girl, I didn't realize till later, but I had an older brother that was he was just a natural. He broke records in sports. And so that was really my drive. And as I became that second of 5 kids, it was trying to find your place. You're just kind of lost in the shuffle. So you're trying to figure out where you belong or what are you good at. So when I actually finally got into the sports and I dealt with it, that was my identity. I had a place where everybody identified with Forrest. Oh, he's a basketball player. He's going to make it professional. So that was my identity, and I wrapped myself in it. And then when it didn't happen, now here's this conundrum of who am I? What is it that's special about me, or what is it that I want to do in life? Because I'll be honest, I had tunnel vision. I did the grades. I had the grades, but I did it as a necessity to make it in sports. It wasn't my thing like, oh, I'm going to get this job. I thought I was going to play professional till I was about 40 and then figure it out. So that was that journey, and not having that now, you're at this conundrum of who am I and where do I find the power to succeed in life? Because no matter what you do, even if you do things spiritually, that's definitely a start, but you have to take those steps personally every single day. So it's that journey of actually taking those steps and believing the things that you're praying for and that you're actually asking God to help you with.
So you mentioned your faith and you mentioned God, and I love that because sometimes we can't see what the next step is. You can't see what the next step is. Is it the right step? And I know for me, I've questioned that a lot of times. God, is this the path? Is this the plan? Give me a sign. How has your faith played a monumental role in you getting to where you are today?
You know, it's interesting because growing up a PK, I think at the age of 8, my dad became a pastor. So that PK is known as the preacher's kid. It, it was a weird space because my dad changed and there were so many things he just started to cut out. Growing up in the 80s, when they got into church, it was like either fire and brimstone. It was either one way or the highway. So that was such a huge transition for me. So there was this space. I have to believe that I wasn't sure what was going on, but I did watch my father and my mom raise 5 kids. My mom quit her job, to my dad, and watching his faith raising 5 children, starting off at church in his home to growing now 43 years later, still in business. It's one of those things that you have a tendency to learn faith through a person's actions. So I watched my parents. I watched how they handle people. I watched how they use their integrity to deal with things. I watched the decisions they make, and also watched my dad's belief and seeing him pray. Those were the things that really helped me to understand faith. And it wasn't just from, this experience, but it was also watching it and seeing it in action. And that's how I realized that it was something that I could actually put my belief into.
I love that, man. And I'm sure your parents had to sacrifice a lot, raising 5 kids, building a church, starting a ministry. What did you end up having to sacrifice in your life to get where you are today? And how critical was that for you to recognize those sacrifices?
There were relationships that I had to put aside. As I started to make transitions and decide there were things that I wanted in my life, there were people that were friends that I had been involved with, but I also realized there were certain things that I couldn't continue to do. I had to change my life and make better decisions about what I wanted to do. And so oftentimes when you make these decisions, people don't become haters. Everyone's like, oh, these people are hating on my progress. It's not that they're haters. It's just that they don't understand the path you're on. So it doesn't make sense to them. And so I had to recognize that the decisions that I'm making for myself as an individual didn't have to line up with everyone. They didn't have to agree with what I was doing, but I had to be confident in the fact that I was making the best decision for myself and for my family. And so with that being said, certain relationships started to wane, not from anything, malicious, just from the fact that we were going down different paths. And I had to recognize that there was nothing wrong with that. And that's just a part of growth in certain areas.
Yeah, I've kind of had a similar experience. Unlike you, mine was because of some bad decisions that I made and had me to realize what people were good for me in my life and which weren't. But I think a lot of people, especially when you have a big dream and a big vision, you don't really want to talk about that to your inner circle because they don't understand it. They don't understand that you have somewhere you're trying to get to. You have an impact you're trying to make. They don't get it. So when you try to talk to these people who don't have a big dream or big vision, it's going to kill your dreams. It's going to keep you stuck. And unfortunately, I understand all about that as well.
Well, something that's interesting about that is that you actually were a part of the process too. That's the thing that's interesting. I was a part of the bad decision making. As a matter of fact, I might have been one of the ringleaders. So, that's the part that doesn't make sense. They never tell you that, like, oh yeah, you were part of the catalyst for all these bad decisions. So now you're on this enlightened path and people don't understand. Yeah, it makes sense. They're like, what are you talking about? You're the ringleader. You're the one that, orchestrated us to do all of this. So yeah, that was a part of the process because I wanted to experience life and I did it to the fullest. I made sure I made up for everything that my parents wouldn't allow me to see, growing up. And so now it's like, all right, let me get back to what I was taught. I actually know now that that's not the way. So sometimes the decisions you make, you have to own the fact that you're not understood because, even the path you're taking, you wouldn't understand if you weren't actually going through it.
Yeah, and like I don't expect really anybody to understand because it's my life. Like your goal, your mission, your impact that you're trying to make, you can't make people understand purpose and passion. You just can't.
Right.
You can you either have that or you don't. And I think a lot of people they don't have purpose in their life. And I think that's why 80% of the country is probably miserable, because they're not aligned with their purpose and calling in this life. They just don't know that that's what it is.
Yeah.
And, for me, I want to agitate that pain point when I talk to people, of getting them to understand there's a calling on your life. There's a reason why God created you. Do you know what that is? Are
Mhm.
you even aware of the gifts that he's giving you to go use and bless other people?
Yeah.
And to me, it drives me up the wall, man, when people don't see that.
Yeah. It is definitely a challenge, but like Christ, we have to have grace. That's what I always believe, because I'm sure there were people that looked at me at a certain point and they're like, Forrest, what are you doing? Why are you making all these mistakes? You could be doing so much better, because there's always someone that sees the potential in you oftentimes before you see it. And so that's just one of the things that I've had to learn, is to have patience. Now that I'm on my journey and I have this direction and I know what I'm doing in life, just to remember there was a point in time when I didn't. And when I didn't have that direction, you could have told me something and I just would have walked the other way. And it wasn't just being belligerent, it's just that I couldn't see it. I was in a dark place and I just couldn't see that truth. So I just make sure to always speak good on people. I don't try not to gossip or get into ill will and talking about people, but just more or less pray for them and just, give them uplifting words when I see them, to try to encourage them when their time comes.
Yeah, I love that, man. And my coach did a similar thing with me. I don't think we can see the picture when we're in the frame.
That's right.
And he, he's kind of helped me out with a lot of things that I can't see in myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to see them, but I think it's interesting that we don't see ourselves as other people see us.
Yeah.
Other people see me like, oh, you're a podcaster, you're this, or they see you, you're like, you're doing all this stuff. But sometimes we look in the mirror, we're like, who are you? What are you
Yeah.
doing? And I think it's an interesting concept when we can't see our greatness.
Yeah. And that's where that mind comes into play. Oftentimes our worst enemy is ourself. We tell ourselves things that go against what we should where we should be going. And that's where that concept of, being mentally tough and understanding your power, basically the power that you have are the words that you let come out of your mouth. It's not some divine thing. It's really a simple concept. The words that you speak are speaking life into yourself. So instead of saying things negative, speak positive. Try to speak affirmations every day. Talk to yourself. Speak affirmations to others. I believe in sowing certain seeds. When you do things out in the earth, those things will come back to you. So you have to create a habit of positivity, of dealing with these things, and also learning how to deal with conflict, because that's a part of growth, is knowing that everything is not going to be peaches and roses, but when you have conflict, it's how you approach it and how you deal with it that helps you to grow in different ways.
Yeah, I think conflict and adversity and challenge and change are all just a test from God. Like if we want to do something, I think if anybody has a big dream or big vision, they want to do something,
Right.
you're going to have adversity come at you, because it's going to
Absolutely.
test you to see how bad do you really want this. Do you really want this, Sean? Forrest, do you really want this? Is this what you want? I'll give it to you, but it's not going to come without challenge, adversity, heartache, anguish, sleepless nights. And you talk about thoughts. I mean, it is very critical for me, and I have to work on this daily with mindset and
Yeah.
affirmations and self belief. And you said something at your keynote. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you were telling yourself, I am a great speaker. I am this. I am that. Like,
Right.
how often throughout the day do you go through this process? Is it like a routine and you do it in the morning, or when you feel like you're kind of slipping in your thoughts and you're getting off track mentally, do you kind of correct yourself? And like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'll do it every day. When I get up and when I'm brushing my teeth, I'll just look in the mirror, just be like, Tough, you are the man. I mean, listen, it's real simple. You just have to say something, say something positive, and that's the thing about it. It's not so much of, a ritualistic thing that I do in terms of how I go about it, or if something happens, it's just something that I just have a tendency to do. And it's, you can feel as if, oh, you're bragging, you're telling yourself this, you're telling yourself that. But the truth is, when you walk into unfamiliar territory, speaking wasn't my genre. I was a behind the scenes person. I worked in media. I started a media production company. So I worked behind the scenes to actually now get in front of people and share my story and be vulnerable. That wasn't my MO. So it did take a certain level of belief in myself to know that, okay, you're going to travel to Japan. You're going to travel to China. You're going to be in Europe. You're going to be in these places and you're going to say something that resonates with people that don't look like you and don't know who you are. And it's so interesting. Like you said, when I saw you, you were like, who are you? And that's the thing about it. Who are we? We're people just like everybody else. We have human experiences. The one thing that attracts people to people is the human experience. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, you have human experiences. We all deal with love. We all deal with not feeling good enough. We all deal with overconfidence or ego. These are things that people deal with. And I try to focus on those when I present my message. I try to focus on the things that we deal with in our humanity as opposed to the assets that we have or those type of things. That may be great for some speakers, but for me, I feel like it's the human experience that connects us all.
I love that, Forrest. And we are spiritual beings having a human experience, absolutely. But I think that most people are in one of three phases of life. And every time I meet somebody, I ask them, what phase of life are you in? They're like, what are you talking about? I say, well, you're either in a crisis, you're coming out of one, and you're going into one. That's it. And they're like, and they stop and they're like, how did you know? I'm like, well, because that's everybody. Like, to me, when I approach anybody and have a conversation, I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind because I recognize that even though I don't know them, I can guarantee that they're going through something. And it may
Yep.
be something horrible, trauma, cancer, loss of a loved one, loss of a pet, loss of a divorce, a bankruptcy, an addiction, whatever it is, somebody's going through something. So for you to be able to relate to people and make it a human experience connection, I think being relatable was very important in speaking, particularly. And I'm curious, when you go to these other places, like what is your level of anxiety like? I mean, do you have those negative thoughts when you're getting ready to step on the stage about you don't deserve to be here? You know who you are, you know where you came from. Like, does that pop up when you go different places, or when do you notice the imposter syndrome kind of kicking in your life?
Yeah, it happens when I'm speaking sometimes. It happens when I'm booking or selling myself or pitching. It happens so much because you recognize there are times when you go into unfamiliar territory. But when you go in, you have to have a confidence because when you're one thing I recognize about business, because we're in the speaking business. So there's the act of speaking, but there's also the act of closing a deal. And with closing that deal, you have to have a relationship with people, but you also have to know how to sell yourself, sell your points, and sell the relevance of your message. So that imposter syndrome kicks in when you start selling your points because now you have to get into another lane. You can't just get into the empathetic and, that you have to actually sell someone that you're the best person for this job at this time and that the money that you have allocated, you'll get an ROI if you invest in having me talk with your crowd. So that comes into play when you step on the stage, but you have to fight these thoughts. It always happens. And it's not something that just turns off. It's something that you deal with constantly and you learn to live in it. So even when you're living your confidence and the more you do it, the more confident you become in it because now you realize this is a reality. This is a truth. I am living the things that I'm speaking, but it could happen at any moment. And you just have to reinforce yourself by giving yourself that boost over time, every day, reinforcing yourself so that those positive thoughts can overtake those negative thoughts when they appear.
I love it, man. You talk about being vulnerable, man. And as guys in particular, we're taught not to be vulnerable at all. We're taught to not
Yeah.
talk about feelings or emotions. And a lot of
Yeah.
counseling for me, my counselor wrote a book called How to Human Up in Modern Society. And the whole book dealt with guys emotionally because we're taught to be hunters and gatherers and warriors and, and
Right.
showing, being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. I think there's a real beauty in exposing yourself.
Yeah.
Why do we not want to do that? Why are we so scared to let people see our most intimate thoughts and who we really are at the basic core of a human being?
Well, I think most of us, I'll speak for myself. I think humans in general, we don't like the rejection that comes with it, but we also don't like it when it's thrown in our face. You know, as men, when we're vulnerable, we're sharing it because this is a place of breakthrough for us. But if you've had the experience where it's been thrown back in your face, you develop this notion, I'll never do that again. I'll never share this again to give someone a weakness. And so I think that's where it stems from because men as communicators, we're not overly talky. We're not just gossip driven. Not supposed to be. Maybe we are now. I don't know. But myself, I'm not like that. So it's something, if I share it with you, I'm sharing it with you because I trust you to know what to do with it. So when we now get into this place of speaking, you're now talking to audiences of people you don't know. And you don't even know if they care about you. Like you say, you walk into a place, they may not even know who you are, and you're sharing these stories, and you have to think, do they even care? Like, you're telling them this, but do they even care? Have they looked at you and judged you when you walked out and said, I don't like this guy. I'm not interested in anything he has to say. I don't think there's anything that he has to say that would be of any interest to me. And I'm sure that happens in the crowd. You know, you can't walk out and think that you're interesting to everyone. No, there's some people that find you terribly boring, not entertaining, but you have to be okay with that because that's just the reality, you know. And I think selling these stories helps you to not be so full of yourself. When you share these vulnerable moments, when you're having this success, it's like, okay, well, let's forget the success. Let's talk about what we went through because that's going to keep me on a certain level, not to get too full of myself. So I think for me, that's one of the things that it does. And that's one of the reasons it was hard to share these, but it's also one of the reasons I share it so that I can continue to grow.
So you mentioned something about acceptance and rejection and pain and suffering. From my personal experience, pain and suffering put me on the path to my purpose. Why does it take that to wake us up? Why can't we just be like, you know what? This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to go do it. No, I have to go through some really dark valleys to figure out what that is.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of us have to learn the hard way. It's just like that. I can't explain it. There are those that actually walk a path and they're blessed because they don't need the experience. Unfortunately, I was one of those. I needed the experience, and it may have taken off things, but for me, I think it helped me get to this place of authenticity because I don't believe if I didn't have those experiences, I couldn't be who I am in terms of sharing with others today. Some people can. And I think that's the thing about the individual. We all have a journey that we need to go on to help us get to this better person. And oftentimes, some of us need to go the hard way. So I think that's what we're dealing with, Sean. We might just be a little hard headed and had to bump our head a few times before we could get to some truth.
Oh yeah, man. I'm absolutely a firm believer in that, man.
Yeah,
Daddy used to always say, hard head make a soft behind, boy. So
that's right.
but
That's
when
right.
did you feel like you were called to serve and help other people? When did something happen along the way? You're like, I just want to help people get what they want out of life. If I can show them how to get what they want, I'm going to get what I want. Everybody's going to be happy. Everybody wins. Everybody's successful. When did you adopt that philosophy into your businesses?
Actually, it was a kid. My mom told me when I was young, she said I always wanted to work with special needs kids. She said,
Mm.
you always wanted to work with special needs. And I think for me, and even going on missions trips and just doing a lot of things around, I've always had a passion for people. And I think when you grow up having that passion for people, sometimes you get hurt. And so you start to build these walls that make you callous. But as you become more of an adult and you start to recognize what's happening, you revert back to who you were. You try to get back to yourself and you recognize that you can't judge the world based on a few hurts that have come from different people. So for me, this is something that I always wanted to do. And I think the shift for me was learning how to be shrewd. That was the shift for me. It wasn't being people oriented. It was learning to be shrewd so that I could actually grow a business, because that's the piece that is missing oftentimes in business. You can be nice, but there's a time to be nice. There's a time to be friendly, and there's a time to be about the business. And you may have to be a little short, a little curt if it takes that to actually make sure that you're handling the business. So that was the process for me. It actually worked the opposite.
Yeah, I've heard that before, man. And I'm kind of like you. I'm a nice guy. I've been in leadership roles in corporations, and it didn't work out for me because I was too nice.
Yeah,
Like I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to believe that there's good in you to do what you're supposed to do without you taking advantage of my niceness. So for me,
that's right.
I think I could be that person too. I just don't like being that person.
Yeah.
I don't like being that. It's not fun being that person.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't, because when you're easygoing, you're like, listen, we don't have to make this a big deal. And it's now you find yourself when you have to get in that other lane initially, you don't know how to do it. So you're actually a little more stern than necessary. You're like, wow, this feels uncomfortable. So it takes time to find that balance where you can still be a leader, get your point across, and still be easygoing. And people can take it and go, yeah, that didn't hurt so bad. But they also understand that, I got to respect this guy when he says what he says. So there's a fine line, and it takes you getting in an uncomfortable situation so that you can be comfortable.
I love it, man. I love it. Purpose-driven life, man. When you have a purpose and you have a mission in life, it's a little bit different than just having a job. Why don't you think, or in your opinion, most people don't strive to live a life with purpose? They just kind of go through the motions. They go to the job, they come home, they watch Netflix, they get up, they go to the gym, they go to the job, they come home, they watch Netflix. They do that for 30 years, and they won't give their dream 5 years. Why do you think that is?
I would probably say bills and taxes. Yeah, those two things they mean a lot. Purpose doesn't also equate to money or security. People have bills, they have kids, they have responsibilities. They have mortgages, car notes, credit card loans. They want to take vacations, and a lot of time entrepreneurs, they give the 9 to 5 a bad rap. I say, stop it. There are people that work for years, 9 to 5, but guess what? They get a steady paycheck. They can take care of things. They know when money is coming in, and they're able to sustain that life. It may not be the most fulfilling, but they actually get to accomplish some things. I think with entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. And so many people are not just entrepreneurship, but when you live this purpose-filled life, you may have satisfaction, but they don't also talk about the down times you have living a purpose-filled life. There are times you're going, where's this money? Where's the money coming from? What's next? I mean, I don't feel good about what I just did. I felt great, but I felt like I was exposed. I felt like they didn't treat me the way that I needed to be treated in that situation. So I think a lot of times when people talk about a purpose-filled life, they don't give an accurate description that it's not going to always be roses. There's going to be some hard times with that purpose-filled life. And I think that's why some people choose, they say, pick your poison. And some people say, you know what? I'll just lay back, live my life. And, maybe when I get this retirement, I'll look at it on the second go round.
Do you think we're always chasing something in life? You think that the human being is always just like, I think now more than ever with social media, we're always looking for acceptance, validation. Like we're always trying to chase something in this world that really doesn't matter at the end of the day. People want cars and houses and jewelry and stuff and like all this material stuff. I don't think any of that stuff really matters, and we keep a scoreboard by that stuff. Like for success, particularly, people look at, well, how much toys you have is how successful you are. How dangerous is that?
I think it can be both ways. It's like a two-edged sword. On one end, I'll use myself an example. I pride myself on not focusing on the things, but at the same point in time, I do. Right. So there's this fight to stay relevant, because relevance is the thing that also gets you booked to support your family for different jobs. But at the same time, you're like, okay, you have to create a justification. Oh, it's branding and marketing. I'm not bragging. It's just me branding myself. It's just me doing what companies do in order to grow. So there's this fine line with social media because there's so much noise.
Right.
There's so much noise, and you have to know when to filter the noise out. You have to know when to pull back, when to push. And I think it's just a fine line because over the past 15 years, the world has changed so much. It's like now, if you did something 3 years ago, it's like, oh, that was ages ago. Is that even relevant? So there's this need to stay current. There's this need to stay relevant. When you're booking a job, let's say as a speaker, the first thing to ask, when was the last time you spoke at a conference? Well, you don't want to say 3 years ago. You're like, oh, yeah, last year. I did it last year, just 2 months ago. So there's that thing also. And I think it's pushing everything, for us that are trying to get out and we're trying to make a name. There's this necessary thing that we have to do, but it's finding a line where it doesn't overtake your life. So that's my perspective on it, because I can also see it where times I'm like, I just want to get rid of this. I don't want to advertise. No, I don't want to be in this magazine. I don't want to do any of this. But I also recognize it's necessary for some things that I'm doing.
You talk about relevance and perception. I mean, I think it's safe to say that, perception is key for everything, because how somebody perceives me, somebody perceives you, we can make our life look very different online. And the perception could be everything's great, when in reality, it's falling apart.
Yeah, it's true.
How do you stay relevant today? What do you do for relevance? So like, is there certain things you look at in the industry for speaking and coaching? Like what are your, how do you keep on that track to make sure you're on top of your game?
Well, I listen. I do a lot of listening. I go online. There's so much information available to us now that, I definitely am online, researching, reading, and I love to read. I love to just hear dialogue. And I actually go on social media sometimes and just scroll. I'll actually have a designated time where I'll just go through and scroll to just see what's relevant in the world. Some of it, because for me, in my line of work, it's not something where I want to be out of touch.
Right.
So I actually do things like that. I'll go through and I'll just scroll. I'll look at stuff. I'll just laugh. I'll waste some time just enjoying myself, because in life, you have to have a balance. It can't just be all work, work, work. Well, it can. It just depends on how you want to balance your life. Being a husband and a father, for me, I like to be able to crack jokes with my wife and my kids. And, if they say, Dad, look at this, and, it's TikTok, I could care less, but I want to be able to enjoy it and have an understanding so that we can actually enjoy life also. So for me, the balance is doing what I love doing, turning into the grumpy old man that I want to become one day, but also, try to stay a little fun loving for my family and just, and with people. So it's a tightrope walk. It is, you want to become this hermit and go away, but you can't. You have to stay in and stay relevant and listen to people and listen to different ideas and just kind of take it in so that you can form opinions, or you can form points that will give people different perspectives.
I love it, man. And Forrest, I appreciate your time so much today. One more question, man, before we jump off here. What does success look like for you? Your vision of success. Let me know what that looks like for you.
Success for me is getting to the end of the road and having my family there with me. That whatever I did in life, they were proud of me, and I'll be missed. And they realize that I created a legacy for them, and I created something that they can grow from. And I also, financial security is something that I consider a success also, because it's one of those things that allows me to have a better quality of life with my children and my wife. So for me, it's just how you're remembered and how people speak about you and the things that you did that made an impact with the time that you had here.
I love it, Forrest. I appreciate your time today. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you for your services, your businesses, your coaching, any of that stuff?
Yeah, you can go to forresttuff.com, and that's 2 R's, 2 T's, 2 F's, forresttuff.com. And it'll take you to everything. It'll take you to my business website, coaching, film industry, and also my speaking site. That's the one place where you can find everything, and all my social media handles.
Forrest, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. Best of luck on all your adventures, brother.
Thank you so much, Sean. Great talking to you today.